Okay, I know we are midway through the class period, but that previous video was actually intended to be a video at home assignment. And so we're not quite done with everything I want to get through today. So I want you to take a look at this warm up and solve it. Pause. Okay, so we are told that we want to take a sample size of 5 out of a population of 45 sites. And the sites are labeled 01, 02, all the way up to 45. And we want to choose our sample. Okay, so that means I'm going to take these numbers 2 at a time. And the first one I see is 38, which is valid. So all of these start with 38. That doesn't really help me. The next 2 digits are 68, and I claim that we should ignore that. Why? Well, there isn't a site 68. It stops at 45, so I'm going to ignore that one. The next one I see is 35. Is that one good? I think it is. So I have 38, 35. The next one I see is 02. Is that one good? I believe it is. The next one I see is 79, which I think we should eliminate because it is past 45. The next one I see, oops, I forgot to add 02 up here. The next one I see is 38, which is a valid number, but I claim we should ignore it. And the reason for that is we are told that this is sampling without replacement, meaning once a site gets chosen, it doesn't go back into the sampling frame. It stays out. So I'm going to ignore this 38. And my next one is 22. And my next one after that is 40, which is valid. And I believe that leaves me with E. Her sample is 38, 35, 02, 22, 40. Okay, so you just learned about stratified random sampling and cluster sampling. And you also know simple random samples, voluntary response samples, and convenience samples. And we know that the ones involving probability, such as simple random samples, stratified random samples, and cluster samples, are going to give us less biased results. However, even if I choose my sample perfectly, there are still some issues that can happen. The first is undercoverage. Undercoverage is when some members of the population are unintentionally excluded from the chance of even being selected. I don't stand a chance of being selected, okay? If I am polling households, that means I am excluding people who are homeless, or usually students who are living in dorms, or prison inmates. These people don't have the chance to be chosen as part of the sample, even though they are part of the population. If I'm doing a poll via telephone, somebody without a telephone is subject to undercoverage. In our house, we don't have a landline anymore, and most polls can't be done via cell phone. They have to be done on landlines. So I am now subject to undercoverage with those polls. So undercoverage is when somebody doesn't have a chance of being selected. Another issue is called non-response. Non-response is when an individual who is chosen does not participate, either because they can't be contacted or because they refuse to participate. A lot of times, if I do get called on my phone to answer a survey or something like that, I'm too busy and I kind of just hang up because I don't want to be bothered, and they always call during dinner and that kind of thing. Non-response tends to be more prevalent in urban areas for whatever reason. And to account for this, people conducting the polls will often substitute other individuals from that same area. But this is not really okay because you're not necessarily making an equal replacement. If you're replacing somebody who is annoyed at these calls with somebody who's super duper friendly and has all this time to answer, you're going to get a different kind of response than the one that you missed out on. And so that can tend to sway your results. So the difference is that if I'm a prospective survey respondent, undercoverage happens when the entire group that I'm a part of is left out of the sample. I don't have a chance to be selected. Non-response happens if I get selected, but they either can't find me or I refuse to answer. Okay, let's say the sample is chosen fairly. I take measures to avoid non-response and undercoverage. There can still be misleading responses, and this is called response bias. This can be caused by a number of things. Okay, so response bias, again, is when I get misleading or incorrect responses. This can happen if the questions are about illegal or taboo behavior. All right, if I'm asking somebody about their drug use or something like that, they may not be honest with me. That's response bias. The sex or race of the person interviewing can affect people's responses. If somebody is asking about, I don't know, how happy someone would be if the next US president were a woman, well, if a woman is asking you that question, you might have a different response than if a man is asking you that question. The next one says faulty recall. Sometimes this is you really just don't remember. You're going to give your best guess, but you just don't remember. If somebody asked me a question about how many times I worked out in the past year, my estimate would probably not be very accurate because my memory is not that good. Finally, the wording of the question can mislead certain responses. If the question is confusing or contains a lot of technical language, or if the question leads you to give a certain response, it can result in response bias. I have a few examples. A survey paid for by the makers of disposable diapers found that 85% of the sample opposed banning disposable diapers. The question was, it is estimated that disposable diapers account for less than 2% of the trash in today's landfills. In contrast, beverage containers, third-class mail, and yard waste are estimated to account for about 21% of trash in landfills. Given this, in your opinion, would it be fair to ban disposable diapers? All right. This question is very leading. The question gives me all this information about how diapers aren't that bad, and then asks your opinion about banning diapers, okay, disposable diapers. They didn't present equal information on both sides of the issue. They gave me one side and then asked my opinion. They didn't mention how difficult it is for these disposable diapers to decompose as compared to yard waste. All right, they didn't mention the other side of the issue. They just gave one side that sort of furthered their cause and then asked for your opinion. So this is a leading question, which is going to lead to response bias, or is likely to lead to response bias. Here's another example. An opinion poll conducted in 1992 for the American Jewish Committee asked, does it seem possible or does it seem impossible to you that the Nazi extermination of the Jews never happened? When 22% of the sample said possible, the news media wondered how so many Americans could be uncertain that the Holocaust happened. 22% is pretty high. A second poll asked the question in different words. Does it seem possible to you that the Nazi extermination of the Jews never happened, or do you feel certain that it happened? Now only 1% of the sample said possible. I want you to discuss with your neighbor what you think happened here. Pause. Okay, the way the question was worded originally is very confusing. It has like a triple negative in it. Does it seem possible or impossible that this did not happen? I know very much how I feel about whether or not the Holocaust happened, but I don't know how to answer that question. So we have to make sure the question is really clear. This is just a confusing question. So people got confused and gave an answer that didn't represent their actual opinion. Okay, selecting a random sample eliminates many potential biases. A simple random sample or a stratified random sample is going to be much better than a voluntary response sample, okay, or a convenience sample. Still, it's unlikely that the results of a survey will exactly mirror the population. Okay, it's not going to be exact because we're not examining the entire population. It's just giving us an estimate. However, the larger the random sample is, the more precise it's going to be. So a larger sample gives us more precise results than a smaller sample. Everything on this slide raises issues, though. A truly random sample is very, very difficult to take, and most of the time we do rely on voluntary response or on cluster samples. convenience samples. Also, a larger sample is going to be more, it's going to cost us more time. It's going to cost us more money. So these are all issues that companies and the government face when they're looking to take a sample and administer a survey. Okay, so that is it for today's lesson. Here is homework assignment number 2. You have a quiz tomorrow on section 5.1, so please make sure you understand all this vocabulary. Watch these videos again at home if you need to.